Hi, my name is Janet Wang. I am a second-year medical student at the University of Toledo College of Medicine and Life Sciences, and I have been genetics research for 6 years.
And hi, my name is Boachie. I'm also a second-year medical student at the University of Toledo College of Medicine, and I do have a master's in biomedical science.
Hi, my name is Katherine Schaub. I have a Ph.D. in history from Case Western Reserve University, and I'm also a second-year medical student at the University of Toledo College of Medicine and Life Sciences. And we have no disclosures to report.
The idea for this session developed from a pattern we had seen where the race of patients was emphasized in certain disease presentations. For example, learning materials for medical students present sarcoidosis and sickle cell anemia as Black diseases, while others, such as cystic fibrosis, are characterized as white diseases. We also noted how much genetic research seems to rely on racial categorization, even though we know that race is not an immutable biological category. To this end, we consulted with a medical doctor, geneticist, and a medical historian to delve into why the use of race as a biological meaningful category persists, and how relying on the idea of biological race perpetuates systemic inequalities and ultimately harms patients. This led to the creation of the class Genetics, Race, and Racism in collaboration with Dr. James Willey, which is part of the student-run elective Medical Racism and Systemic Health Inequalities launched last year.
A major goal of our session was to introduce students to the idea that scientific knowledge isn't created in a vacuum, and scientific inquiry is a historically and culturally embedded practice. We showed how modern medical research runs the risk of treating racial categories as biologically fixed and having explanatory power by themselves, when in reality, racial categories and their meanings change over time and are culturally specific. This built on themes we discussed in an earlier class session on the history of medicalization and race, as well as the role of professional medicine in providing scientific legitimacy to ideas about racial physiology. We designed the session to give students a toolkit to analyze the materials they will encounter throughout their medical career. The session had 4 main components, beginning with a refresher on the historical background, which led us into a presentation on the status of contemporary genetics research.
In order to dig into the relationship between race and genetics, we showed how pre-existing ideas of race were baked into the production of genetic research in ways that continue to be relevant today. We also looked at racialized diseases and treatments in relation to specific examples of sickle cell, cystic fibrosis, and hypertension. We demonstrated that allele frequencies stratified by race alone do not justify nor fully explain treating these conditions as having a strong racial link. Racialization is driven by the interaction of cultural attitudes, advertising, and research priorities. Racialized medicine is also not a benign process, and we included specific examples of harm that has been done to patients, such as the story of Mr. Terry Wright, a Black man who wasn't diagnosed with cystic fibrosis until adulthood because of the classic picture of cystic fibrosis of that of a white disease.
One of the key goals of the lecture was to make sure we had a robust discussion about the topic at hand. So we divided students into small groups to help facilitate dialogue. After the main lecture, we provided the students with a research paper that talked about racial disparities in the frequency of preterm birth. This paper makes the assertion that race, rather than racism, is a dominant risk factor contributing to the higher incidence of preterm birth, especially minority populations. The class dissected the paper and the erroneous claims that were made. The lecture provided the students with the necessary knowledge to be able to understand that race is a social construct. As a result, the use of race as a deterministic biological variable when accounting for risk and diseases may be erroneous. With this understanding, we facilitated a discussion on the effects of racially charged medicine on patient outcomes. Students and faculty involved with the course continue to engage with these issues in other forums, such as the use of race norming in the calculation of EGFR. Scholars in humanities and social sciences have argued unequivocally on the social construction of race. This then begs the question, why is race being used in medicine as a factor with biological significance for explaining health outcomes among populations? It's imperative that students are taught this topic so that they do not mistake the effects of racism with evidence for inherent racial differences. Thank you for your time, and here are our references.